What would you do if, while making a charitable donation, you came face to face with the person you've missed most in your life? Alex Mendoza had everything money could buy: mansions, luxury cars, bank accounts that never seemed to empty. But there was something that not even his millions could fill, the void he'd carried in his heart since childhood, when he was told his parents had died in a tragic accident. He didn't know that morning, when he decided to visit a forgotten nursing home in San Antonio to make a simple donation, his life would change forever. Why? Because sometimes fate has a cruel way of returning what you thought was lost forever. A wheelchair-bound elderly woman, her gaze lost and her white hair disheveled, would whisper his name in a way that would send chills down his spine. And in that moment, Alex would discover that his entire life had been built on the biggest lie imaginable. This is the story of a man who had everything but had nothing. A man who thought he was an orphan, but who was about to discover that his mother had been alive all these years, locked away in the hell of a squalid nursing home, while the person he trusted most built an empire on her suffering. Get ready for a story that will keep you up at night, because when the truth comes to light, there's no power in the world that can stop a son seeking justice for his mother. The rain hammered against the windshield of Alex Mendoza's black Mercedes as he drove through the streets of San Antonio. At 42, he owned the most successful hotel chain in the US, but on that cloudy morning, he'd decided to do something different. His secretary had found a nursing home that needed urgent donations, and he wanted a break from board meetings and fancy cocktail parties. St. Vincent Nursing Home looked like something out of a nightmare. The walls were peeling, the smell of dampness permeated everything, and the elderly residents sat in broken chairs, some staring at the television without really understanding what was happening on the screen. The director, a small woman with shockingly red hair, rushed to greet him as if he were a celebrity. "Mr. Mendoza, what an honor to have you here. We just need a photo for social media and—" But Alex wasn't listening. His eyes had locked onto an elderly woman sitting near a grimy window. She was in a wheelchair, her white hair tousled and her gaze vacant, but there was something about her face that paralyzed him. It was as if an invisible hand was squeezing his chest. He approached slowly, not understanding why his hands were trembling. The elderly woman slowly looked up, as if sensing she was being watched. Her eyes, though weary, held a clarity that unsettled him. When he was in front of her, the woman raised a trembling hand and touched his cheek with a gentleness that sent shivers down his spine. "Al," she murmured in a raspy voice, "are you my boy?" Alex was petrified. Nobody at the nursing home knew his name. Nobody outside his inner circle called him Al. The director quickly approached, her expression nervous. "No, don't mind her, sir. That's Carmen. She's been here for many years. She's confused. She has no registered family. Sometimes she says things that don't make sense." But Alex couldn't tear his eyes away from Carmen. Something inside him screamed that this woman wasn't a stranger. The way she tilted her head, the way she looked at him, it was unbearably familiar. He left the nursing home without taking photos, without giving the symbolic check he had brought. He only left a substantial amount of cash and asked for permission to return whenever he wanted. In his car, his hands sweaty on the steering wheel, Alex couldn't get those weary but knowing eyes out of his mind. There was something there, something his mind couldn't process, but his heart had already begun to understand. Alex Mendoza couldn't sleep that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Carmen's face, heard her voice, breaking as she spoke his name. He got up several times, walked barefoot through his penthouse, poured himself tequila. But nothing soothed that feeling that something fundamental in his life was about to change. At dawn, he went straight to the house where he had grown up. It was a colonial mansion in Los Angeles that he kept out of pure sentimentality, though he hadn't lived there for years. He had to find something, anything, that would give him answers about this inexplicable connection with Carmen. He went up to the attic where he kept old boxes of childhood memories. Among photo albums and children's drawings, he found a shoebox he'd never fully opened. His hands trembled when he saw what was inside. It was a yellowed photograph showing him, barely 2 years old, in the arms of a young woman with a sweet smile and long, cascading hair. It wasn't his Aunt Dolores. The woman had exactly the same eyes as Carmen. He turned the photo over with trembling hands. On the back, written in hurried script, it said, "Carmen and Al, my whole life. Mexico, 1983. He slumped into an old chair, the photograph clutched in his fingers. His mind was a whirlwind of confusion and terror. For 40 years, his Aunt Dolores had repeated the same story. His parents had died in a car accident when he was very young, and she had raised him as her own son. But that photo said something else. It told him his mother had been alive long enough to hold him, to love him, to be photographed with him. He also remembered strange things from his childhood, documents Dolores kept under lock and key, visits from serious men who spoke in hushed tones when they thought he wasn't listening, the word inheritance mentioned in conversations that were abruptly cut short when he appeared. He grabbed his phone with trembling hands and called Sergio Vasquez, a private investigator who had worked for him on company matters. He wasn't cheap, but Sergio was one of those guys who wouldn't let go of a case until he found the whole truth. "Sergio, I need you to investigate something. Urgent. Tell me, boss. I need you to find out everything about a woman named Carmen who's at the St. Vincent nursing home. And also, I need you to check the records of the accident where my parents supposedly died." "Supposedly?" Alex looked at the photograph again. "If my mother is alive, what else did Aunt Dolores lie about?" Alex didn't go straight to confront Dolores. Something in his gut told him he needed more proof before accusing her directly. If she had lied for 40 years, she wasn't going to confess easily. First, he returned to his childhood home and went straight to Dolores's study. It was a small room she had always kept locked when he was a child. Now, with the keys in his possession, he didn't need anyone's permission. He checked drawers, old papers, contracts. Everything seemed normal until he remembered something. As a child, he had seen Dolores put important documents in a secret compartment in the bookcase. He ran his hands over the furniture until he found a small, hidden button. Pressing it opened a false panel, revealing a recessed safe. He tried several combinations until he hit on the date of his parents' supposed accident. Inside, he found stacks of bills, jewelry, and several manila envelopes. One was marked personal and contained documents that chilled him to the bone. A copy of his mother's death certificate dated a year before the accident, and a power of attorney where Dolores was listed as the sole guardian, claiming there were no other living heirs. That same afternoon, he showed up at Dolores's house unannounced. She lived in a stylish mansion in the hills, surrounded by manicured gardens that starkly contrasted with the rot of her secrets. When she opened the door, Dolores maintained her usual maternal smile. "Al, what a surprise! What are you doing here so late?" Alex held the envelope containing the forged documents. "We need to talk, Aunt." Dolores's smile wavered for a split second, but it was enough for him to notice. She let him in, and they sat in the elegant living room, facing each other like boxers before the first punch. Alex placed the fake death certificate on the glass coffee table. "What is this, Dolores?" She looked down for a moment, then looked at him with that smile she'd used her whole life to manipulate him. "I don't know what you're talking about, my dear. Don't play coy. My mother is alive. I saw her. Carmen is in a filthy nursing home while you live like a queen on her money." For the first time, Dolores' mask cracked. Her expression hardened, turning as cold as ice. "You're right," she said in a dry voice. "I had no right, but I did it because that woman would have dragged you down into her madness. You buried her alive for money." Dolores stood, her eyes blazing with rage. "I did what I had to do to save you. I was the one who raised you, who gave you everything. Alex also stood, trembling with fury. "What you gave me doesn't justify what you took from me." Dolores smiled venomously. "And what are you going to do? Destroy the only family you have left?" "I'm not alone anymore. She is my real family." The next day, Sergio called Alex, his voice tight with the excitement of a big break. "We need to meet, now." They met at a discreet coffee shop in West Hollywood. Sergio arrived with a manila envelope and looked like he hadn't slept in days. He sat opposite Alex and pulled out a stack of photocopied papers. "I've been going through old files at the Red Cross, hospitals, private and public. The accident where your parents supposedly died did happen. There are official reports, newspaper clippings. It's all real." Alex quickly scanned the documents, recognizing his parents' names in the medical reports. "But something doesn't add up," Sergio continued. "The medical report says your mother survived the accident, although with serious injuries and mental confusion." "Mental confusion?" "Yes. Apparently, after the accident, Carmen was taken to a hospital in Austin. She was there for a few weeks before disappearing from the system." Alex felt his hands tremble. "And nobody asked about her?" "Not officially. The records show a woman claiming to be her sister picked her up. She took her from the hospital and placed her in the nursing home where you found her." Sergio searched through the papers and pulled out a yellowed form. "Here's the name of the person who picked up the patient. Dolores Mendoza. But there's a detail you won't like." "Which?" "Dolores wasn't Carmen's sister. According to the family records I obtained, Dolores was the sister of your adoptive father, not your biological mother." Alex closed his eyes, feeling the world crumble around him. "Then, who faked her death? That's the million-dollar question. But I found something else." Sergio pulled out copies of bank statements. "Shortly after the accident, huge transfers were made from your parents' accounts to overseas accounts, all legally backed under the pretense that there were no living heirs." "Dolores, everything points to her. But we need more evidence. And we need to find out where all this really happened." Alex remembered something Carmen had murmured in one of her lucid moments. Carmen mentioned a place. Hope Ranch. Does that ring a bell? Sergio turned on his laptop and quickly searched. Here it is. A dilapidated property outside Austin, registered to the Mendoza family decades ago. Alex leaned forward. "We need to go where it all began. Hope Ranch." The drive to Hope Ranch was a bone-jarring labyrinth of dirt roads and potholes, rattling the four-wheel drive Sergio had managed to get his hands on. After 4 hours under the relentless Texas sun, they finally spotted the abandoned structure in the middle of nowhere. The ranch looked like a grey stone ghost, choked by vines and weeds. A rotted wooden gate hung on a single hinge, as if time itself had decided to let it slowly die. Alex went first, sensing the air smelled of dry earth and buried secrets. They pushed the gate, which screeched so loudly that even the birds took flight from the nearby trees. They pushed through an overgrown courtyard to the main door. Alex shoved hard, and the wood gave way, releasing a cloud of dust that made them cough. Inside, the house was filled with furniture draped in dirty sheets, crooked paintings, and broken glass. They searched the rooms until Sergio found something strange in the library, a trapdoor in the floor, half hidden under an old rug. "Look at this," Sergio said, pulling at the edge of the trapdoor. The wood groaned, but yielded, revealing stairs descending into a dark basement. They turned on their flashlights and went down slowly. The air was frigid and smelled of mildew. The basement was filled with dusty boxes and broken furniture, but in one corner, almost hidden, was a small door. Alex opened it, and the flashlight illuminated something that left him speechless. "This is my parents' car, but it was supposedly destroyed," Alex murmured, staring at the rusted chassis of the blue Honda Civic he instantly recognized. "Someone deliberately hid it here," Sergio said, examining the remains of the vehicle. In the passenger seat, Alex found a silver pendant, a small heart engraved with the initials C and J, his mother and father. But what truly shattered him was finding amongst the boxes Carmen's medical report dated days after the accident. "Sergio, you have to read this," he said, his voice trembling. The report was clear. Patient transferred at the request of a family member. No diagnosis of permanent disability, only partial memory loss. Psychological treatment recommended, not institutionalization. Carmen only had partial memory loss, not dementia, Alex exclaimed. Dolores knew she could recover and still locked her away. Sergio stuffed all the documents into his backpack. "With this, we can bring Dolores down, but we need something more." "What?" "If there's a witness to what happened here, we can completely destroy her." In the nearest town to the ranch, a dusty village called St. Michael, they found a small grocery store that seemed to be the heart of the community. An elderly lady in a blue shawl looked at them suspiciously when they entered. "Good afternoon, ma'am. We're asking about Hope Ranch. Do you know anyone who worked there many years ago?" Sergio asked respectfully. The woman studied them for a few seconds, as if weighing whether she could trust them. "Why do you want to know?" Alex stepped closer, taking off his sunglasses. "Ma'am, my mother experienced something terrible at that ranch. We need to find witnesses to help us get justice." The woman adjusted her shawl and came out from behind the counter. "My husband, Esteban, was the foreman there for many years. He's sick, but if you want to see him..." She led them to a humble house at the end of the street. In a bed by the window, covered with a wool blanket, lay Mr. Esteban, a man whose face was weathered by the sun and years. "Mr. Esteban," Alex said, approaching slowly, "my name is Alex Mendoza. I came to ask you about what happened at Hope Ranch 40 years ago," Alex Mendoza said. The old man opened his eyes with difficulty and stared intently. "Mendoza, that's a heavy name, kid. Do you remember a woman named Carmen?" Mr. Esteban let out a long, painful sigh. "Of course I remember her. She was a good woman, always smiling. I saw when that woman, Dolores, arrived, nervous, in a car that was half destroyed." Alex leaned forward, his heart pounding. "What happened that day?" "I saw everything, kid. Your mom was alive, confused but alive. She was asking for you, asking for her child. 'Where's Al? Where's my son?' she said again and again." Alex felt his eyes welling up with tears. "My mother was looking for me?" "Yes, kiddo. Dolores threatened me to keep quiet. She said that if I talked, she would get me into big trouble. Then she took your mom away without telling anyone, without papers, like she was an animal." Sergio stepped forward. "Mr. Esteban, would you be willing to testify about what you saw?" The old man smiled sadly. "Kid, I don't know how much longer I have left, but if I can help justice be served, I will. Not for you guys, for her, for Carmen." Alex squeezed his hand gratefully. "Now we have everything to destroy her, but Dolores won't give up easily." With all the evidence gathered, Alex hired the best criminal lawyer in Los Angeles, Joaquin Herrera, a man in his 50s known for demolishing impossible cases. In his Beverly Hills office, they meticulously reviewed each document, each testimony, each piece of the puzzle that incriminated Dolores. "We have fraud, document forgery, fraudulent administration and kidnapping," Joaquin said, arranging the papers. "Your aunt could go to prison for decades." The lawsuit was filed on a rainy Tuesday. The media caught wind quickly. It wasn't every day a famous millionaire took his own aunt to court. When the day of the hearing arrived, the 17th courthouse was packed with journalists and onlookers. Dolores arrived impeccable, as always. Designer dress, perfect hair, accompanied by Esteban Ordonez, the most expensive and unscrupulous lawyer in Los Angeles. She smiled as if she were going to a party. The prosecutor presented the case clearly. Dolores had forged documents, illegally moved properties, and held Carmen captive for 40 years. They presented the original will, the medical reports proving that Carmen wasn't incapacitated, and the devastating testimony of Mr. Esteban. When the old foreman testified about how Carmen asked for her son while Dolores forcibly took her away, the courtroom fell silent. Alex had to discreetly wipe away his tears. But when it was the defense's turn, Esteban Ordonez tried to discredit all the witnesses without success. The judge didn't allow him to clutter the case file. It was clear Dolores was losing. That's when she decided to launch her last and most venomous attack. She stood up during a recess and approached Alex with a devilish smile. "Do you want to know the whole truth?" she whispered in his ear. "You are not Joaquin Mendoza's son." Alex looked at her in disbelief. "Liar, your real father is Guillermo Vega, the owner of Fox Television. Ask your saintly mother why she had to hide that she was pregnant by a married man." Alex felt the ground open up beneath his feet. Guillermo Vega was one of the most powerful businessmen in the United States, owner of media outlets with political connections that reached the White House. Dolores saw his shocked face and smiled cruelly. "Are you sure you want to keep stirring up the past? Because if Guillermo finds out you have his blood, he could destroy you." Alex trembled with rage and confusion, but managed to articulate a response. "Even if it's not my blood, Carmen is still my mother." That night, Alex couldn't sleep. Dolores's revelation hit him like a ton of bricks. He locked himself in his study with a bottle of tequila and called Joaquin. "Is it true?" he asked without preamble. Joaquin sighed on the other end of the line. "I investigated after what Dolores said. Yes, it's true. Guillermo Vega and your mother had a relationship before she met Joaquin Mendoza. Why didn't anybody tell me?" "Because Guillermo Vega abandoned your mother when he found out she was pregnant. He was a married man with political aspirations. He couldn't afford a scandal." Alex squeezed the tequila glass until his knuckles ached. "And Joaquin Mendoza? He took you in as if you were his own. He raised you, loved you, gave you his name without question. He was your real father, Alex." Joaquin's words pierced his chest like daggers of light. For 40 years he had mourned the death of a man who had loved him unconditionally, while his biological father lived in a mansion in the hills, without even knowing he had a son. Did Dolores know all this? Of course. It was her ace in the hole. She knew she could blackmail you with that information. Alex poured himself another tequila and looked out the window at the city lights. "Do you think Guillermo knows I exist?" "I don't think so. But if he finds out, it could complicate things. He's a powerful man with a lot of influence." Alex closed his eyes, thinking of Carmen sitting in that wheelchair, lost in her world of fragmented memories. "I don't care who my biological father is. The only thing that matters is getting Carmen out of that hell." "Are you sure?" "More sure than ever. I'm going to win this lawsuit. For Carmen, for Dad Joaquin, for the truth." The next day, when they returned to the courthouse, Alex had an iron will in his eyes. Dolores tried to use the revelation to destabilize him, but he had already made his decision. True love wasn't in the blood, but in the actions. And Carmen had been the mother who was stolen from him, while Joaquin had been the father who chose to love him. Now it was his turn to choose. Fight for justice or run from uncomfortable truths. On the day of the verdict, the 17th courthouse was packed. Alex arrived early, accompanied by a surprise he had been working on all week. Carmen was there, in her wheelchair, attended by a specialized nurse. She was dressed in a light blue dress, and her hair was neatly combed. Her eyes, though still lost at times, seemed sharper than ever. Dolores entered as always, head held high, but for the first time Alex noticed cracks in her armor. Her smile was forced, her hands trembled slightly. The judge, a serious man surnamed Ramirez, sat down and reviewed his papers for what seemed like an eternity. Finally, he cleared his throat and spoke in a firm voice. "This court has thoroughly reviewed the evidence presented. The forged documents, the witness testimonies, and the medical evidence are conclusive." Alex felt his heart pounding in his ears. "This court finds Ms. Dolores Mendoza guilty of the crimes of fraud, forgery, fraudulent administration, and unlawful deprivation of liberty." The judge's gavel hit the table like thunder. The immediate restitution of all assets to their rightful owners is ordered. Carmen Reyes and Alex Mendoza. Furthermore, preventive detention is ordered for Ms. Dolores Mendoza while the final sentence is determined. Dolores stood up, her face distraught for the first time in decades. "This isn't over!" she screamed as the bailiffs approached. "It is over, Aunt!" "Forever," Alex Mendoza replied, a calmness surprising even himself. While Dolores was led away in handcuffs, something extraordinary happened. Carmen, who had remained silent throughout the hearing, suddenly fixed her gaze on Alex with a clarity she hadn't shown in years. "Al," she murmured, but this time her voice sounded different, more present. Alex quickly approached and knelt beside her chair. "I'm here, Mom." Carmen raised her trembling hand and touched his face, exactly as she had done in the nursing home, but now there was genuine recognition in her eyes. "My boy, I've been waiting for you for so long." Tears streamed down Alex's cheeks as he carefully embraced her, feeling that 40 years of emptiness finally began to fill. Photographers snapped pictures, lawyers gathered papers, people filed out of the courthouse, but for Alex only that moment existed, the true reunion with his mother. "Now we can start our real life together, Mom." 6 months later, in a renovated colonial house in Beverly Hills, Alex pushed Carmen's wheelchair through a garden filled with purple bougainvillea and jacaranda trees. She had been taken out of the nursing home immediately after the trial and was now receiving the best medical treatment available. The doctors at Cedars-Sinai had been clear. Carmen would never fully recover her memory, but with consistent therapy, proper medication, and above all, love, she had shown surprising improvements. She was no longer the lost woman from the nursing home. Her eyes had life, she smiled frequently, and there were entire days when she seemed completely present. That Sunday afternoon, as the bells of a nearby church chimed, Carmen watched Alex set a table under the pergola for Sunday lunch. "Mijo," Carmen said clearly. Alex immediately approached. Each time his mother called him lucidly, it was like receiving a gift. "Yes, Mom. Are you happy?" The question, so simple and direct, took him by surprise. He knelt before her and took her hands. "Very happy, Mom." "For the first time in 40 years." Carmen smiled, that smile he had learned to recognize as genuine. "My boy, I never forgot you, not a single day." They embraced under the shade of the jacaranda as the aroma of the mole the cook was preparing filled the air. It was an embrace that healed 4 decades of absence, lies, and pain. Alex had discovered that true wealth wasn't in hotels or the bank accounts he had recovered. It was in those simple moments, having breakfast together, watching old American movies, listening to Carmen humming songs by Buddy Holly that her memory held intact. Dolores had been sentenced to 15 years in prison. Her assets were seized to compensate for the damage caused. Alex never visited her, nor would he. That chapter was closed forever. As for Guillermo Vega, he decided never to look for him. Joaquin Mendoza had been his true father, the man who raised him with love regardless of his origins. That was all he needed to know. As the sun set over Beverly Hills, painting the sky orange and pink, Alex sat next to Carmen. "You know what, Mom?" "What, mijo?" "I think Dad Joaquin would be proud of us." Carmen squeezed his hand with more strength than she had shown in months. "He's watching over us from above." Alex smiled, knowing he had finally found his place in the world, beside the woman who never stopped loving him, building new memories on the foundation of unconditional love.